road running through a subdivision where lots of different side roads fade into it, and a local road would be what we would consider to be a subdivision road that only really services the people that live on that street or just past that street.
I think that explains it. This is like a repeat then of the other one.
I think it is.
So this would that motion would make this redundant, and maybe it should say to require sidewalks on both sides of collector roads and arterial roads. Would that be more appropriate?
I wonder, Councillor, if you don't mind, given the fact that our present policy dictates 2 sidewalks on arterial roads, as our general manager described, everything else is a single.
Sorry, arterial and collector?
And collector.
And collector are 2 sides. Because there's significantly more traffic on arterial and collector roads, and then a local road would only have a single-sided sidewalk.
All right, then I guess really we should just remove that because we already have the policy.
Item. That's correct, because we already said previously we wanted on
just one
the status
side.
quo. We didn't propose any changed policy previously.
So I'd like to remove that.
Okay.
Motion to remove it.
First paragraph in the recommendation regarding issue number 78 would be to be removed, and that is a motion. So speaking to that now, Councillor Breton. No, I have another. Okay, all right. Any further speakers on this item? Councillor Breton, or I'm sorry, Black has pointed this out to us. Columbus, please.
Yes, but this one includes condominium. Could we get a
No,
comment?
it's just the first paragraph, Councillor, that the motion would remove.
Good enough, thanks.
Anyone further on the motion, which would be simply to remove the first paragraph from the recommendation regarding issue number 78? Seeing no further speakers, those in favor? I see no one opposed, so that is carried. Councillor Breton, back to you. Sorry, first Breton.
Well, I'd like to remove the require sidewalks on private roads in condominium projects. That's the whole idea of a condominium development, that these people want to develop these things and have their own services the way they feel that they're needed in a condominium. And there's lots of cases where they don't have them, and I personally don't think they need them. And there's a recent one that went in here I can think of where they don't even have curbs, and they're designed properly for drainage and everything. And we start telling a private developer on a condominium development everything he has to do. I think we're defeating the whole purpose of a condominium. That's the whole idea, how they put in the lights the way they see things, I believe, and they pave the road the way they see things. They can be attached condos or detached or whatever. They provide the services that they think they need in their development, plain and simple. So I like to remove the sidewalks in condominiums, that second paragraph. Thank you.
Okay,
and I'll make that a motion.
That is a motion. I'll ask us to speak to that motion if we can. First, Councillor Black, then Sonnenberg.
Yes, and I agree with Councillor Breton. Exactly. You know, it's private land. That's one of the advantages of a condominium corporation. Another advantage, they can do they have more flexibility than a subdivision, and if they want sidewalks, they can put them in themselves. If they don't want them, then they don't have to have them. So I'll support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Sonnenberg to the motion.
Thank you. I too will be supporting it. The very nature of a condominium is such that properties are smaller and people pay less for their lots for their dwelling. In a condominium, the lots are so small that if you see a car parked with its bumper up against the garage, the other bumper's at the curb, where would you put a sidewalk? So, no, I can't see sidewalks in condominiums. Thank you.
Further speakers to this motion? Seeing none, then the motion would be to remove paragraph number 2 from the recommendation regarding issue number 78. Those in favor of that motion? Those opposed to the motion? You were in favor, Councillor Black? Yeah, I thought you were. Okay, I see no one opposed, so that does carry. Anything further then on page number 78? I would just make one comment, Council. I held my tongue until you passed the motion, but it seems to me that recommendation was consistent with our active transportation policy as a council, and and we've kind of taken away, because there may be residents in those condo developments that would appreciate the safety and security of a sidewalk. Mayor Luke.
Yeah, but I also know in supporting that motion, it doesn't keep a developer from saying, I want sidewalks in my condominium.
Absolutely, you're right, you're right.
Because
Doesn't
I'll tell
prevent
you,
them.
there are a ton of older, well, why am I telling you that? I'm looking at the age around this table. There are a ton of seniors that do not want to shovel sidewalk. And I realize that condo, it's usually in the fees. But the option's still open to the developer.
You're right. Just takes away the mandated aspect, doesn't it? Page number 51, any questions or concerns? Mayor Luke first.
Yeah, help me with section 4222E.
Okay, staff, could you explain the need for the recommendation around 422E?
So first of all, this policy was put in place at a time when the county had responsibility and could decide where wind towers would be. That is now gone. It's now with the province.
Okay, so it's simply because we don't have that choice now. That's fine. I
This
just
one's
couldn't
almost
recall
a
what.
housekeeping item in that sense then, isn't it?
Yeah, and I just wasn't familiar exactly with what 4222E was.
Thank you. Any further speakers on page number 751? Or 52? Any questions or concerns on page number 53? Or 54? Particularly emergency management on 54. Page number 55, again relating to wind energy, presumably the same rationale for the previous amendment. I don't mean to ask that as a question unless staff, was there the same rationale for deleting that section?
For deleting the section,
Yes.
but it also adds policy. The county still comments on applications and provides policy which outlines the basis of how you will comment on those applications.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Brunton.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, on page 54, we talk about the stormwater management ponds. I just wanted to ask Lee her, I guess, idea behind ponds that are developed for, residential subdivisions. I know in the past, these things have become an issue. In some cases, I've seen them done under the Drainage Act, but which seems very odd to me in terms of a residential area. But I know in commercial and development, we've tried to make the commercial developer responsible for the pond. I just wonder what her ideas are on these things and if they should be spelled out more specific in our OP. Could you comment on that, Lee?
Through the chairman to council. With respect to the ponds, ideally, we should have regional type of ponds so that we don't have a 20-lot subdivision with a little pond beside another 20-lot subdivision with a little pond. Ultimately, they become the municipalities to own and maintain in perpetuity. And so ideally, we would like to have more larger regional ponds that service a larger area. So that is sort of the direction that staff are heading, is to encourage larger ponds. They will decrease the ongoing maintenance costs that we'll be looking at by reducing the amount of infrastructure that we are responsible for. With respect to in commercial or industrial type of developments, there is sort of a twofold process with respect to that. Typically, industrial subdivision is designed such that there is a pond that would service the industrial subdivision, and each lot within that subdivision would have a certain discharge rate and quantity that they'd be able to discharge. Should they exceed that, then they would be responsible for creating their own things on their own property to retain the water to meet that criteria. So some developments, depending on how they're structured, do end up with privately owned ponds on their property. That's their responsibility to maintain, and those ponds would typically discharge to the municipal pond.
Okay, so this clause number 5, if I may, says add policy that stormwater management ponds must be located within the boundaries of the urban or hamlet area in which the subdivision is located. That type of ponding would be the responsibility of the municipality?
Ultimately, yes, it would be our responsibility. But the ones located on private property to control the runoff from that private property would be the responsibility of the property owner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Height, I think we're back on page 55, are we, or?
Yes, we are.
Okay,
A bit of page 54 as well. Under emergency management,
okay.
I see we're going to revise some policy regarding Long Point and Turkey Point safe access to state that new development will not be permitted unless an emergency flood response plan is in place. So I brought this up last week, and I'm looking to Mr. Cridlin for an update, because if this plan takes 18 months to come in, this better be solved by then.
Mr. Cridlin?
Through the chair to Councillor Height. Yes, as early as this morning, Chris Baird and myself met with Cliff and Lori from the CA to discuss some details on this. I may put Chris on the spot here. I can answer that we've met. We are pushing ahead with ideas. However, I'm not sure how we meet the timelines or how it ties into this. So hopefully Chris can shed some light on that.
Mr. Baird?
Thanks, Chairman Oliver. Councillor Height, that's correct. We did meet today. We've kind of going to be coming at the solution in a couple of different areas. One through the planning side, where I'll be working with Mary, Pam, and Matt. Bill through the emergency response piece, and then the CA in terms of the policy. I know the board is dealing with applications routinely. So we're going to try to do it as quickly as we can. But it will likely involve some infrastructure upgrades when those are due. So we need to work with Lee and her team. So those are sort of a four-prong approach. But I think it can mesh well with the official plan timelines for sure. But certainly it's our goal to have something for council to endorse, as well as to forward to the Conservation Authority to do the same.
Okay, but do you figure that you will have it done by the time this official plan comes up for final review?
I expect so, yeah.
Excellent. So I'll move the motion that we remove that clause, because it will be dealt with before then. Number 4.
Yep.
All right, that's handled at so many layers right now. We don't need another layer, and it needs to get dealt with ASAP.
All right, so that would be the recommendation from Councillor Height, that recommendation number 4 around issue number 85 be deleted. Speaking to that motion, Councillor Black first, and then I'll seek
And what, if this is going to be resolved, then there's no harm in having it in here, but we are unsure of whether, how this is all going to unfold, and I would rather support this motion being kept in. As I've raised this issue myself many times about access in those hazard land areas of Turkey Point and Long Point both. So I can't support the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brunton next. Did you have a question, Councillor Brunton?
Yeah, I think I can, hearing what Mr. Barrett has said and knowing the concerns of the Conservation Authority, I think we could take it out, and if we have a resolution by the time we get to the end of this process, fine. If we don't, then we may have to deal with something different at that time. But to leave it in there, and if we happen to pass it, it really puts the Conservation Authority in a bad spot, because we're having a lot of difficulty with applications when they come forward. So I can support removing it for now. Thank you.
To staff, Pam?
Through you, Chair, to Council, I'd just like to advise Council that even if there is an emergency management plan put in place before the official plan review is completed, that still does not create policies in the official plan that we can use through our day-to-day planning applications to refer to. This is an important tool for us as planners, especially if we're in front of the Ontario Municipal Board, to be able to revert back to our policy regime. So I would advise Council that even if this plan is completed, that we still have the ability to include these policies in the official plan.
Thank you. Further, Councillor Brunton?
I don't dispute what Pam said, but we don't know what that policy is going to be. And the way this is written now, I guess I'll say it stops everything. Am I correct on that? It puts everything on hold that we're trying to do at the conservation level. So I have that fear that if we leave it, and it may be as simple as we're down the line that we have some form of air raid sirens, or 6 months or 6 weeks notice, or whatever we're going to have, 6-hour notice, I guess, to get out of there. I mean, I don't see Turkey Point as a problem to start off with. They have 2 accesses in there now, in egress. Long Point's a little different, but if we get some details on the causeway, that may all be for naught. So I'd like to see it out of there, because all it's going to do is stop what we're trying to accomplish. So, anyways.
Councillor Height to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking one last time to the motion, the Conservation Authority itself has more justification for this type of policy, as they're the protectors. And once it's approved by them, Norfolk County should just approve it. There shouldn't be an extra layer of red tape to go through. Now, one may think that Turkey Point is a safe bet because there are 2 ways out. The only problem with that is that one of the ways is in the middle. So the western side of Turkey Point is in a floodplain. And this states here that no new development will take place until that's fixed. That's going to be a really tough fix, period. Unless you're thinking that Norfolk County is going to raise that road by a meter, which would just make a whole bunch of little grid pockets to flood out the rest of the cottages. It's going to take a lot more than that. And adding another layer for people that want to build and develop out there, it's a very, very painful process. And you know, we're rewriting the policy at the Conservation Authority, where we're taking all this into account, and Norfolk County needs to pick up its socks when it comes to an emergency plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Black.
Well, council already knows the limitation on these areas, and yet want to put more people at risk. I think that's irresponsible. So I can't support this. I think this is, I really appreciate staff bringing this forward, because it needs to be in here, and the whole purpose of it being here has nothing to do with development, but addressing the safety of the people that already are there. If you're going to add more development, you're putting more people at risk.
Thank you. This was one that I had circled, and I'm going to offer my opinion, if you don't mind, Councillor, on your motion. I'm concerned that if we delete this, that would still not necessarily guarantee that our policies would allow for development. I might have liked to have had it worded in the positive rather than the negative. In other words, new development may be considered provided the emergency plan is in place, rather than saying it will not be considered unless. But I kind of share some other concerns expressed by Councillor Black and I think by staff, that if we delete this, in a sense, our OP would not, even if the emergency plan is developed, would not necessarily be able to allow development to occur. And I may be wrong on that interpretation, but that's a fear I have around this. Further speakers, Councillor Geisens and then Brunton.
Thank you. As far as I know, Long Point, I don't believe that there is any more lots that we can that can be built on. Yes, they can tear down a cottage and rebuild it and everything like that. But I'm not so sure about Turkey Point. There may be a few, but there certainly isn't a whole lot of more cottages to be built on any of those, as far as I know. Right. So maybe I'm wrong. So theoretically, Long Point, I don't believe that there are any left. So I don't see what the problem is in taking it out.
Thank you. Councillor Brunton.
Well, Councillor Geisens has touched on it. I guess maybe if you look at the wording, it says new development. The problem with we're having isn't new development, it's just raising a cottage or improving a cottage. And every time somebody wants to improve a cottage, raise it up 4 feet to the appropriate flood elevation as requested by Long Point, they throw this access egress problem in, and it's hanging in front of everybody all the time. That's the problem. So I don't know if we can change the wording in here somehow where it says to state that new development, well, new development to me is like if somebody wants to put a new subdivision in Turkey Point or Long Point. We're not talking about that. We're talking about basically raising a cottage or improving a cottage in Turkey Point or Long Point. It has nothing to do with Hastings at the present, I guess, or maybe it does, I don't know. But all we're talking about is raising cottages and improving them maybe in so many square feet of extra floor area. But this clause basically stops that because they apply that to new development. So maybe staff, and I make a recommendation that staff come back with a recommendation that doesn't say new development. Maybe they reword that somehow that says existing development continue to be improved somehow. Look in that wording.
Councillor, we can deal with that depending on what happens to Councillor Height's motion, but we still have to deal with his motion first, and that was to delete this item number 4 completely. Councillor Columbus, to the motion.
Yes, I'd like to ask staff what their definition is of new development, because my thinking is it's probably if you have a cottage there, it's dilapidated, you knock it down right from scratch and start right over again and build it more than 50% of the existing floor space. Is that their interpretation, or is it actually a new, like an empty lot with development on it?
That's an important point. Staff, can you help us on that, or Matt? Do we have a definition of new development in the context of this recommendation?
Sorry. Through the chair, we're of the opinion that new development means a brand new building, it means a rebuild, it means an expansion.
Okay. So in other words, the scenarios we've been talking about would be captured by new development. So, okay. Speaking further to the motion, Mayor Luke.
You know, Councillor Brunton, I'm right on the money with what he's saying here. I don't totally agree with new development being an expansion. I mean, yeah, it needs a building permit, but if it's an existing residential unit, people are living in it, I don't think that we should hold up a permit or an application to expand or put an addition on or go up a floor based on an emergency, they're still there. So that to me is very prohibitive. A brand new building, a brand new use in a building, a new building go up for new use, absolutely. I would agree with this. So I think we have to get this one right. Otherwise, we're just every time somebody wants to put on a back porch, saying, no, can't do it, we get this emergency plan. So I'm not going to support it. I'm sort of somewhat supportive of the motion, but I think we really want to be careful. We just don't shut everything down in the way of people wanting to improve their structures, buildings, whatever you want to call it, because of the lack of an emergency emergency management plan, I guess I'll call it that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Speaking further, Councillor Brunton, I'll allow it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me speak one more time. And I think maybe it says prepared in consultation with the Conservation Authority. If we could put this one on hold, have the Conservation Authority, they know what the board at the Conservation Authority want, to be able to, raise cottages, build new cottages to 50% larger. If staff could come back and cover off those issues, and nobody's talking about a new subdivision in these areas, or maybe, I don't even know if we allow severances down there anymore. So it's more a case of rebuilding what's existing. If you could come back with some wording that's maybe more appropriate than what's in here, that would be better served. And I'd like to defer that to staff.
So you're recommending a deferral of this particular item? So you're recommending a deferral of the motion, I think, aren't you, until we have further clarification?
Yeah, and then, yes, I think that's the best way to do it, because there's some merit to leaving some clause in there. I think staff have asked that. At some point, we'll have a plan, we hope, that allows for emergencies, but I think in the meantime, we don't want to prohibit people from improving things down there. And so if we could defer it for now and have staff come back to rearrange or change the new development to cover off the issues that we have with the Conservation Authority, with raising cottages and et cetera.
Councilor, I'm just going to offer an opinion before I go to staff. The part of the issue with deferral will be the time length. This is a pretty important item in the big picture, and I think we need to specify how long you're prepared to have it deferred. If you're suggesting deferral until after the emergency response plan is developed.
No,
okay.
How about next week? No, I'm just kidding. If you can, the sooner they come back with something, and maybe they want to dialogue with the Conservation Authority, but just, no, I don't want to hold it up.
Okay.
I think I'm leaving it up to staff, because they know what the Conservation Authority wants, and if they don't, go back and talk to them, because we had a whole afternoon meeting there a week ago, where we discussed this issue, and here we are going around in circles. So I'd like to just leave it with staff and see if they can come back and help us with existing properties down there so they can improve themselves. How's that?
That's fine. Staff, two points then. Number one, how long would a deferral have to be before some further clarification and new policy suggestion could come back? And number two, you indicated, Mary, pretty quickly that your staff's definition of new development included additions to and enlargements of existing cottages. I think that's contrary to what the mover and some members around council define new development as, but will you be able to come back if we ask you to do so?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Sorry?
Do I not have a motion on the floor?
You do, Councillor. I'm trying to get a sense of another motion to defer.
I'm looking not to defer it. I'm looking to defer it to the moon, as Councillor Wells say. I want it out. The only thing I want from staff right now is an emergency management plan. Period.
Councillor,
This is redundant as far as I'm concerned.
I have to deal with a motion to defer your motion first. That takes precedence. Councillor Brunton asked to defer your motion to remove. That's what I'm trying to deal with, okay? Timing on a deferral of this particular motion, which was to remove item 4. How quickly could you come back to us?
I'm not exactly sure right now because, as you've mentioned, we would want to consult with the Conservation Authority staff. I'd like to get an update on the meeting that we just heard about here this afternoon. I think there is some room to do a bit of change in this. We have listened definitely to what's been said this afternoon, but I do want to advise Council that the provincial policy statement does require that we have policy in the official plan about access. So either something gets worked out or I anticipate that the ministry will put something in.
Okay, so we didn't get a clear answer on deferral time, Councillor, but speaking to the motion to defer, Councillor Columbus.
Just want to mention that this is a major issue for the Long Point Conservation Authority, and to remedy the situation, it requires Recreation and Community Services to be involved, like the Fire Department and EMS, the Planning Department, and the Public Works Department, because it involves infrastructure for the road. So it is very important.
Yep. Further to your motion to defer, Councillor?
Yeah, just one thing. New development could be defined very easily as lot creation or severance, period. The rest are existing.
Yeah, but I think, Councillor, under the provincial policy statement, staff are saying that it isn't that simple.
Well, I don't think the province is telling us we can't fix a cottage up down there. I don't think they're telling us that. And that seems to be the issue. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we're going to deal with Councillor Brunton's motion to defer this matter. Staff have said it will take time. They have not been prepared to give us a definitive date when this would come back because it is dependent on external forces, i.e. LPRCA. So I will call the question on deferral. Those in favor of a deferral? I see 4. Those opposed? I see 4, and I am also opposed to deferral. So the motion to defer is lost, so we're back to Councillor Height's motion to remove item number 4 from the recommendation regarding issue number 85. Any need for further speakers? Any further speakers on this motion for removal? If not, those in favor of removing that item? I see 5, 6. Okay. That motion is carried. Okay, we are still on page number 55. Is there anything further with respect to item, page number 55? And it also blends over into page number 56. Anything with respect to page number 57? Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here's that word strengthen again. Strengthen the policies. There's some pretty ridiculous things that I've seen in the last little bit, like asking for an environmental impact assessment on someone's lawn. Is this going to be their flower beds? Or worse?
So the question is to staff, can you give us some clarification as to how the policies might need to be strengthened?
This one, through the chair, is just to speak to species at risk, which is something that's came about since the last official plan was done. So it's just putting in policies to recognize that that's there and send them to the ministry. It's not anything more than really housekeeping.
Okay, thank you.
How will this affect people that want to do things?
Through the chair, staff's policy currently is to send people to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs according to their technical guideline that they gave us, and the process works with the ministry, not with us.
So the NEAC committee this has nothing to do with them?
The species at risk is mandated for the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry to deal with. The NEAC committee sometimes is aware of species at risk, made aware of it by the consultant, but it's not something that they deal with. All of the mitigating factors come from the ministry staff themselves.
Okay. Anything further then on page 57? Or 58? Page number 59. Or 60 and 61 actually also relate to issues around natural resources. Page number 62. Page number 63. Food security and farmers markets, community gardens. My page number 64 is blank. That's an easy one. Page number 65 relates to accessibility design guidelines, urban tree canopies, etc. Councillor Black.
Just on the number 100, option 1, this is talking about dictating on private developments, again, I believe, not government property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I guess, yeah, I don't know about some of this. Where it starts with the word instead, strengthen the development. I wondered about taking out the strengthen the development control and community design guidelines, and then just go with instead, ensure that private developments comply with the accessibility standards as set out in the building code. So I'd like to move a motion.
Okay.
So I guess if you could follow me again, on the word instead, delete strengthen the development control and community design guidelines to, and then back in to ensure the, and to the end. I would actually like to add, but I know this isn't feasible, at the end where it says building code, I'd like to add where economically feasible, but I'm not going to because I know that's just won't work. I'd like to.
Okay. All right, we do have a motion on the floor then to amend that recommendation as per Councillor Black's comments. Speaking to the motion, I do have one question to staff on this one, and I'm not sure who will be able to answer it, but is it our mandate as the municipal corporation to ensure that private development complies? I know we have to do it on our own structures and facilities, but is it our responsibility to ensure that private development complies? Or do we just encourage private development to comply?
According to the building code, we have to.
To Matt.
The county's accessibility coordinator sort of in the meeting that we had, in an interdepartmental meeting, pushed back on the policy that I had recommended. It was going too far because it can't, as Councillor Black has said, it's not always feasible on private developments. So I think the wording that has been suggested, the amendment, is probably appropriate and could certainly work with that. So we, outside of the building code, which the county enforces, and the accessibility provisions that are in the building code, beyond that, it's an encouragement.
Okay.
Other than what is built by the private sector but is assumed ultimately by the county, that kind of infrastructure, such as sidewalks and that they should be built according to the accessibility guidelines.
Okay, so Councillor Black's motion is on the floor, and that is to amend the recommendation to delete the words strengthen the development control and community design guidelines to. Speaking to that motion further? I see no one wishes to, so I will call the question. Those in favor of that amendment, of that motion rather? I see no one opposed to that, so Madam Deputy Clerk, are we good on that one? Okay. Anything further then on page 65? Mayor Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, some clarification on the urban tree canopy. When I read the existing direction and comments, it makes sense. When I go to the options for considerations, number one very clearly to me, a tree preservation plan, a tree planting plan, and a tree management plan would be if this is approved, would be the responsibility of the development or the developer, is the way I read it. But when I get to the tree canopy target for urban areas, neither in that column or the recommendation column, I understand what it's saying, but I don't know who's responsible. Is that solely the county that is responsible for a tree canopy target, or is that developers as well? I don't know. Certainly the first part, it's developers. Second part, don't know, and I think it should be clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, can you help us on that?
I think Mayor Luke is correct. The first part is on the onus of the developer. The second part is it's up to the county. It's stated with the word may, so that the policy is there, and it'll be up to council to take those actions if it chooses to do so.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Appreciate
You're
that.
very welcome. Anything further on page 65 then? or 66, which is also part of the same issue. Page 67. We are getting dangerously close here to being finished, which I appreciate. Also 68 relates to the same issue. Page number 69. Page number 70. '71. And page number 72. Page number 73. Councillor Black.
Mr. Chairman, through you to staff, looking at item number 112, it's the vacation home dwellings height, and under the existing direction and comments, I read that the Ontario at the very bottom, in a settlement with the Ontario Municipal Board, the zoning bylaw has set the maximum height at 7.5 meters. There's a proposal on the recommendation to go to 9. How can we do that? How can we go against the Ontario Municipal Board ruling?
To staff?
So since this report was written, council has given direction
Yes.
for this issue to be dealt with separately.
Yes. You remember
So-
we dealt with that last week, Councillor, as well. It's being dealt with as a one-off OP and zoning amendment.
So as far as changing something that the Ontario Municipal Board will be doing a report explaining and so on, and with that, then it's a new matter that you're looking at and providing a recommendation and making a decision on. So when you do that, it's a different context than whatever it was that the board heard at that point in time.
And again, Councillor, don't forget it was the zoning bylaw that we settled with the OMB. This is our OP policy amendment that would enable us to bring the zoning bylaw standard back up again.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I've said it before, you know my feelings. The resort areas are being overbuilt in my mind. I know other councillors don't feel the same as me, but by adding extra height, it adds to the overbuilt nature of the area, which, like I said, and I just got another email here from somebody who supports what I'm saying. They're watching council. So there are people that are concerned about this from a safety perspective, an overbuilt water and sewer, and access, all of these things. And it's just another one. If you look at all the Committee of Adjustment rulings, it's, the properties, okay, fine, fix them up, but they're being expanded. So, which means more people into the area. So I'd like to remove on the recommendation, the 9 meters and just leave it at the 7.5.
Okay, again, I will allow that motion, even though, as staff have pointed out, we dealt with this matter separately last week, but
Is it in
it's
order?
still in here, and so I think you still have the right to move a motion relative to this item. And we'll see what happens, I'm going to suggest.
Well, I don't think it'll go anywhere, but.
Speaking to the motion, Councillor Height.
Wouldn't that be an item under reconsideration, or do we
Yeah,
all have the opportunity to pull every single one of these that we want to rediscuss?
Councillor Height raises a good point, and I must admit I overlooked it. In a sense, since we dealt with this at council by motion last week, I think to entertain a motion today, should it possibly, well, it would almost have to be a matter of reconsideration before we can deal with your motion, Councillor, I think,
Okay.
in
Well,
in light of last week's action, so,
That makes sense,
okay.
procedurally, but I don't agree. But we'll get more information back, right?
Yes, we are going to have a report on this matter and the proposed OP and zoning amendment within the next several months, I think staff told us.
Okay, well, I'll get another opportunity to state
right.
my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. And that does take us to page 74, which is the final page of this issues and options report. And then back to staff. Mary, it's been so long since we started this exercise. Do we need an omnibus motion? We've been dealing with things as they've come up. We've made a number of amendments to the overall recommendations in the report. What kind of direction would you like, if any, today, beyond what we've given? And I'm going back to the motion on the beginning of page staff report 17-18.
Through the chair, those motions that are there are to receive the report as
Yes.
information and receive the land supply report as information, and then for us to continue. So we have the additional
Based on
direction
council
on
direction,
those
yep.
ones that you wanted different direction, but there isn't anything here that talks about the other ones having not given specific direction we're to proceed with.
Okay, Council, I think that's, I appreciate that direction from staff. So I think we do have to deal with the recommendation on page 1 of staff report 17-18. Councillor Black.
Mr. Chairman, I have no problem moving that forward because that's exactly what staff want, is receive it as information and direct them to continue with the process. So I move the recommendation in the
Thank you
report.
very much. And that does allow, the very last paragraph allows for the direction that we've been giving them over the last 2 sessions as well. So I will read the motion to you and then call the question. The recommendation is moved by Councillor Black that the 5-year official plan review issues and options final report as attached to staff report DCS 17-18 be received as information, and that the residential land supply analysis report as attached to staff report DCS 17-18 be received as information. And further, this is the important part, that staff continue with the 5-year OP official plan, Norfolk County official plan review project by providing council with a first draft of a revised Norfolk County official plan based on council direction on the recommendations contained in the issues and options final report. Any speakers to that motion? If not, those in favor? I see no one opposed to that, so that is carried. Thank you very much, Council. We got through it. And Matt, thank you particularly for attending twice and guiding us through this process. We appreciate that. I think we will continue on now. We do have staff here for another presentation, and we know we've got our deputations coming at 5. To Clark and Jerry, you want to break again, Council? We're going to have one at 6 o'clock for sure, but do you wish a short? All right, okay, let's take a short 5-minute break right now, and we'll allow Clark and Jerry to get set up, and then we'll go back at it. Yeah, oh, hi, Candy. I didn't even see you there. I'm sorry. If we can have your attention, please, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to get started. We do have a deputation in a few minutes, and we have a staff presentation just prior to that. So once again, thanks everyone for coming back. We're going to continue right on now into our deputations after the presentation. So I again want to welcome any of those who may have just joined us and remind everyone now present, if you do happen to have a cell phone, please make sure it's on vibrate so that it doesn't disturb the proceedings. And I do also want to acknowledge Judy Ann McCauley, who is our volunteer in the control room today with our feed. And are we back on stream with cable TV? Okay, excellent. So thanks to Judy Ann. Our second presentation, and I will remind folks, we've been meeting as council since 1 o'clock this afternoon, dealing with the 5-year official plan review issues and options final report. Pleased to say that we finished that just a couple of moments ago, and that will allow that process to continue. Our next presentation is Jerry Sakarina, who is our economic development analyst with Tourism and Economic Development. Jerry, welcome, and you're going to speak to us and present something regarding our engaging young entrepreneurs. Please carry on.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as you know, I've been with the county for a year now, and with looking back on some of the things that council has directed staff to do with the youth to engage them has been very well received with the county. SUP Norfolk was one of those programs where we engaged the youth grade 6 to 12, and we often wonder how things are going to go when they move from one location to another, and we did really, really well. Following the corporate strategic plan. We didn't have a youth committee, but we definitely had entrepreneurship. We had retention and attraction through education and awareness, and the kids did us really proud. Sometimes we wonder whether or not we can get through to teenagers and whatnot, and being a father of 3 of them, I understand that, but you know, when we see them do things that we normally can't see the end of the road, it makes things good. None of this would be possible without our sponsors. We had incredible sponsorship from our business community. And I'm going to just pause for a second. I want you to take a look at that, because without that, none of this would have been possible. We had a great support, and it was recognized provincially. I remember when I came to council, you said it was tough to get into the school system and that there was a lot of friction and it's a challenge. I'm very happy to say that we hit 25 out of 28 schools in Norfolk County, and that was in the Catholic school system, the regular school system, and the French as well. Out of the 86 applicants, 70% were in elementary. So when you don't think that the kids really pay attention in class, maybe that's true, but their mind is wandering on other things that is making them money or setting them up for the next entrepreneurs or maybe the next Titan Trailers that is going to be in Norfolk County. The grants that we had were targeted at students grade 6 to 12. The corporate sponsorship came up with $10,000, and we've seen all kinds of different ideas come up. 40 of those youth businesses were funded, and 52 students were helped. How is that possible? Well, kids believe in partnerships as well. They see their weaknesses, they see their strengths, and when they're moving ahead, they see where they can team up and maximize profits. We did a presentation at City Hall, and we did a couple other little presentations because not all students could be there. Very well received, and just all in all, you know, can't say enough good things about council supporting the program and the support from the county staff. Everybody worked together, 100% success, and we're looking for good things. Now, at the end of the summer, they were to submit a report and get another $100 for their paperwork and say what you did, good, bad, or ugly. And we said, you must give us a report and outline those things and a picture. Well, we got 28 reports and 23 awards went out. Guess what? Kids don't always follow rules either. They're just like regular entrepreneurs. They push the boundaries and whatnot. But we stuck to our guns and things went well. When you take a look at some of our entrepreneurs, their smiles are just as big on the outside as they are on the inside. And if I can, and it does work, you see where it says early bedtime? That was one of his cruxes. Mom and dad say it's got to go to bed. Guess what? Entrepreneurs don't like that. They don't like being told what to do, but he's still smiling, and he obviously met his challenges and made some of his goals happen. We also had another one where he was cutting grass and doing some home repairs, and he had to switch focuses because of the dry summer that we had in Norfolk County. Everybody says that we get a little more rain and whatnot. Well, last year wasn't one of those years. So it's nice to see that our entrepreneurs, even at a young age, can change their gears and meet their goals. This young lady had a very hard time because she required a kitchen that met the standards of the health unit, and what she had envisioned and what she thought would happen threw her a curve. No question about it. My heart goes out to her because she fought for almost 2 months to get her business up and running, and had a waiting list and played by the rules, and was, if you notice at the very bottom, looking to change her model for next year because she's seen the revenues that she lost. Some of the feedback we had, and these are from some of the students, I loved the first one, crushed my first objectives. We had students that barely broke even. We had some students that lost money, and we had students that made well over $5,000 and $6,000 and $7,000 and $8,000. So when you think about that, those dollars are retained in Norfolk County. A lot of the kids can't drive, and if they can, they still need mom and dad's vehicles, so they spend in Norfolk County. Norfolk